welcome for another episode of the Wisdom Speakers and Seekers podcast. I am Jennifer Regular, your host, and also a soul-centered empowerment coach at Lighting the Path. Today, I'm here with Dr. Daniel Zeiss from the northern part of Germany. Welcome, Daniel. It's so great to have you here.
Thank you very much, Jennifer. Great being here. Awesome. Thank you.
You know, Daniel started his career as a medical doctor with a specialization in occupational medicine, medical informatics, and nutrition. He has worked for 10 years in the international reinsurance and health insurance business, managed global projects, and headed a department of health management. He is also trained in classical behavior therapy and schema therapy. After exploring many other modalities, searching for treatments that really worked for his clients, he got himself certified as a Peakstates therapist 6 years ago. He now works as a personal development coach, a health researcher, and speaker. He thrives on helping people resolving problems that they have been struggling with their entire life. Today he's here to talk about Peakstates, which is the psychology and biology of consciousness. That sounds fascinating. I am so excited to hear what you have to say about that. But Daniel, I'm curious how you've had a lot of different roles in your life. So how did you go kind of more from the medical model to becoming more of a personal development coach and looking into Peakstates as a vehicle for helping people?
Yeah, Jennifer, that's an awesome question, actually. But even the motivation for me to study medicine was to understand basically how that thing here, this body, this what we basically call ourselves, works. And so I studied medicine, and actually I did not learn much about really how it works in a healthy way. I learned a lot how it works in an unhealthy way when we have a sickness, if there's disease, and then we learn how to treat it. But what keeps it healthy, what makes it work really, and why stuff happens, that's not 100% what I got. But anyway, I went with that at the first, and I lived my life. I became a specialist in occupational medicine, basically combining medicine and consulting and being outside with companies and having exciting, interesting days and seeing many new things. And then I went into the insurance business, as international insurance business, where I learned that, knowledge is great, but there's something more, which is even more important, and that is people skills, social skills.
Yes.
And without knowledge, you can't work there, but without social skills, you won't thrive. And that is basically when I got onto the path of coaching, trying to understand how social skills develop. Some people had it, some people didn't have it. And actually, at the beginning, I was also struggling with it. So then I started to see that it was a wide map, and I wanted to understand why do I say something? Why do I feel a certain way when somebody else says something? And then basically, step by step, I filled that map, and the big chunk was filled when I found the Institute for the Study of Peakstates. There's this book, Volume 1, that Dr. Grant McFedridge wrote, and it's a little bit older now, but it's still valid. And there he explains basically how consciousness fits together. And well, then my map got more full, which I had. And I found that the therapy also was very powerful, and I got certified. And then basically I'm now doing these two things. I'm still working as a medical doctor, and I'm helping people to solve their problems, which are not necessarily problems where they feel sick or have a disease or are diagnosed with a disease, but in coaching where I can help them and even prevent getting sick.
Prevent getting sick. Oh, I love that proactive approach. And what a fascinating story, and learning how consciousness all fits together. Can you speak a little bit more about that, what you discovered there?
Yes, of course. So as we think, we look into the mirror and we think we are one. Okay, that's the same face you see every morning when you look into the mirror, but actually it's not true. Yeah? When during the night you some hairs fell out and some skin cells fell off, and your body had been regenerating, and had killed some cells and has built some new cells. So basically, if you look into the mirror tomorrow, you're not the same person as you are today. So that's the very, very first understanding we need to get to understand that many things we use in everyday life are just very simple ways of putting our life together, but there's more to it. And this, when you apply that to basically to everyday situations where you go and say, okay, yesterday I talked to my boss. Why didn't I say this? Today it's so clear to me would have said, if I would have said this and this and this, then the whole conversation would have gone not south, but the perfect way. But I didn't. So why? What was stopping me? I have that knowledge now after being through that experience, and basically this is when we notice that there's something that we are perhaps sometimes blocked to understand certain things. We are not at our best, and what does it mean to be on our best? And that is actually what the Institute for the Study of Peakstates found, that there is trauma. And trauma is a big term. I mean, everybody has heard that, and most of the time has heard that with rape, war, car accident, plane crash, or like tremendous horrific events. For the Institute for the Study of Peakstates, trauma is every moment in which you don't feel calm, peaceful, and emotionally light. Now,
Oh, wow.
When
That's a
was the
really
last time?
powerful statement. Can you repeat that?
Yes, of course. So trauma, in the definition of the Institute for the Study of Peak State, is every moment where you do not feel calm, peaceful, and emotionally light. Okay,
Wow.
like lightness, like when you had a heavy backpack and you just put it down and you're like, ah, okay. And I think most of the viewers know that because there's a term like the weight has fallen off my shoulders. You know that term, and you
Yes.
basically 2-3 weeks thinking about, do I buy this car, or do I buy this house, or do I marry that person, or whatever big decision you're going to do, and you go with that thinking, and then you go and you go and you go, and then eventually you're like, now I know. And basically that now I know comes with that certain lightness. And that is that CPL moment, that calm, peaceful, and emotionally light moment. We call it short because it's so long, we call it CPL. And that moment basically is when a trauma has been resolved or has been healed, whatever you want to call it. So that weight is lifted off your shoulders or fell off your shoulders, and then you know what to do. And when you now go back to the situation with your boss, when you are like talking and he perhaps or she said something mean, and or you thought it's mean, perhaps it was even encouraging, but you thought it's mean, you're basically not light. You're like really like, oh, it's heavy, it's dull moment, and what do I do? And your thoughts are racing, and that is basically a moment when you're in a trauma. Yeah, you're not calm and peaceful and emotionally light. And then when you're in trauma, you can't think properly. Basically, there's some of your capacity of thinking has been deactivated by the brain, because your brain thinks there's a moment where you have to fight or run for your life. So thinking is not necessarily needed so much when you are running for your life, when your body thinks it's in that fight and flight mode. And so that is when you're in trauma. Okay, so one big takeaway is never take a decision when you're not CPL.
Yes, never make a decision when you're not CPL. I love that. And CPL, it sounds like then is that moment of awakening, of consciousness, of knowing.
Well, it's a moment when you are not in trauma and when you have full capacity of what you are, basically. And the more you get into these moments, the more you will understand more of consciousness, more of the world, and you will see things from a different perspective. And now there's the interesting angle. The Institute also found that trauma is blocking higher states of consciousness. So what's the highest state of consciousness, you might ask? It has nothing to do with drugs or medication or something. It's something, we don't use that at all. It's something when your consciousness just works at a very, very good level. And you know that there are sometimes, perhaps in your past, you have had a day when simply everything works. You wake up, okay, your coffee machine has already done the coffee, it's already there, and you just get into the car and all the traffic lights are green, and you call somebody and that person just picks up. There's no answering machine, there's no waiting, and so everything just flows, and that would be a flow state. Mm-hmm. And that is a peak experience, because it usually happens just some hours or perhaps even a day when you're lucky, but then it goes away. And then the next morning it's like again, oh, I forgot to wash my cup and I have to do this, and I forgot to put water into the coffee machine or whatever. So it's like this regular, okay, every day, what you basically have 85% of the time. But when you're in that peak experience, which is the temporary form of a peak state, then everything is easy. Okay, and the Institute, through 30 years of research, found that there is a moment in for every peak state, there are moments in your development. So even from development before birth and even before conception. So when you were an egg and a sperm, yeah, in your mommy and daddy, there are things that happen. There's even trauma happening. Okay, and when you heal these developmental events, or we call them key developmental events, then a peak state is activated. And you feel, and now it depends on the state which you have, and there's an extensive list of peak states on the Institute's website, and then you feel great, you feel in flow, or you feel like that there's inner peace inside of you, or you feel like that there's silence in your head, no thoughts, okay, beautiful silence, and that basically decreases your stress level, and you have these CPL moments more of the time, and life becomes much nicer to live.
So healing really does support those peak states. And I heard you mention a couple of terms there, the peak experiences and the peak states. Can you share a difference?
Yeah, the peak experience is the temporary, it's just some hours, some days perhaps, and the peak state is a permanent state. Okay, so you have that permanent, you don't necessarily have that active all the time, but you can activate it, but it's something permanent, and the peak experience is what we call just something temporary.
So is it through your work then that you're helping people cultivate a peak state where it is long lasting and more permanent?
Yes. So there are certain things where we can work with trauma. We can work with all the moments in your life where you feel heavy and dull, and we can work with these. Okay, that's not an issue. We work with them, and then you are CPL. You're very neutral to that moment, and then you just continue your life. Or we have certain processes, as we call them, where you basically do a certain thing, certain steps in a protocol, and then you reach a certain peak state. The most common one is the silent mind process, where you get to that silent mind. It's beautiful. You have a silent mind. There's no nagging, and that's everything is cool. You will still have the self-talk. So the thing with your boss, and then you're thinking about your boss, that will still happen because that is regular trauma, as the Institute says. But the nagging and these thoughts, or this grand central station, which is in your head, usually when you try to get to sleep, that's gone. And yeah, that's already really cool.
Sure, everybody wants that.
Well, there's a way to get it. You just need about approximately 3 sessions, 2 hours every session, and then you have that. And the beautiful thing is, if you don't get it, you don't even have to pay, because the Institute, we work on a pay for results basis. So yeah, try it out, and then you know if you get it, you pay, and otherwise, yeah, it was an experience. But usually it works.
Yes.
So and then there's the inner peace process, where you get that inner peace. And how do we get that inner peace? Basically, I think you might know, and that in the past there's something which you don't want to have again. That should never happen again. So you basically grab it and hold it. But now you're today in the present, and you still have an anchor to the past. So you never get really into peace, because you still have that in the back. Okay, I still have to remember that, so it never happens again. And that, if that happens multiple times, like 1,000 or 2,000 times, it's exhausting. Okay, so the inner peace process makes all these anchors go away, and so you come emotionally into the present moment. And if the present moment is peaceful, like this is right now, here in the evening in Germany, you're peaceful. Okay.
Wow. So there's no more grasping on to things that happened in the past, and you're releasing emotional attachments to it as well.
You still can go there. So I still can go and be furious because, I don't know, I got wrong change on the gas station or whatever happened, but I don't have to. And if I go there for whatever reason, because somebody triggered me into that, I still come back to the present. So then I'm peaceful. Okay.
Right. So peace in the present moment. Yes.
Yeah. It's not that state what Eckhart Tolle describes in The Power of Now. That's the beauty way, actually. So we don't know yet how to cultivate that state, but it's pretty awesome. And what sometimes happens when you do this deep inner work, that other peak states get activated. So when you have already cultivated a good way of living, if you're doing meditation, if you're doing yoga, so when you are basically already much in balance with yourself, and then you do that kind of work, then it's very possible that while doing that work, some other peak states get activated. And then obviously we help our clients to have them stable. And I have a client who had just doing the silent mind, or got 4 other peak states activated. So I helped him to make that stable, and he feels like, very nice. Yeah, and life is it's life living from a different angle, living from a different perspective, and for example, for therapists, it's amazing when you have these states because you can be more present with your client. Okay, so your client says something, it's not automatically triggering to something in your past, and you just have to hold your hands and like, okay, hopefully the session is over soon so I can get some air. No, you're just very relaxed, and that's very helpful as well. Or when with other jobs that have to do with people. Always, if you work with people, not so much Excel. Excel doesn't really mind about your state so much. Your computer keyboard might, but Excel doesn't really. But if you're working with people, then that's really different.
This is really fascinating. And you mentioned there's different peak states that can be activated. So are there different names for these different peak states, or are they levels of consciousness, or how are they defined and differentiated, I guess?
It's just very descriptive. There are certain hierarchies for certain peak states. For example, the inner peace brings the head and the heart and the mind closer together. And when all your parts, when all your, I don't know if you're familiar with the triune brains, the head, the heart, and the body. We think with the head, we feel with our heart, and we take gut decisions, right? And if these three work together, then we are very, very well functioning people. And so there's some certain hierarchies in there, but most of the time it's just something that researchers found. They described it and found and looked for it in other people, and then they said, okay, so there are like 3, 4, 5, 10, 100 people who have that, and then that's the state. We give it a name. And as I said, this silent mind and the inner peace are processes where we can guarantee with a pay-for-result basis to get you there. And then there are other states you can work. Right? When you do the work, when you say, okay, I'm committed to a different perspective in life, you do this work, you learn how the tools can be used, and then you get more of these CPL moments, and you get other states activated.
It sounds like a very self-empowering process that is facilitated in a really unique way from what I've become familiar with. This is very different. And I love that this is the kind of work that you're doing. And I can really see how it helps people with those lifelong struggles that they've had where nothing else really seems to work, because it really seems to get to the core and the imprints of what they've been bringing with them in every moment of their life. So what kind of struggles do you notice? You mentioned there's different kinds of trauma. And in fact, we could be trauma, all of us trauma all the time if we're not CPL. Right. So, but just so people can help identify whether their issue applies, what kind of struggles and issues come up that you've seen?
Oh yeah, that's a beautiful question, Jennifer. So every time you don't feel CPL, okay, every time you feel that their life is a burden, or life is difficult, or it's dragging you along, or it's like a mountain of work you have in front of you, that's basically the moment where I say, okay, if that is in your everyday life, why live that suffering? Okay, so when clients come to me, we would analyze basically how their life is and what struggles they find in their everyday life. And then we would focus them so life gets more into flow, it's easier to live. And then it really depends on the client what they want to achieve. For example, for business people who want to go to business, there's a fear of rejection. Most of us have. It's horrible. Okay, so because we have that fear of rejection, do I start that? Do I talk about that with my boss? Okay, what if he asked this, and what if he asked that? And then I do have an answer for that question. And so we're overthinking many things because we don't want to face rejection. Yeah, we want to avoid rejection, and we actually have an addiction to approval of other people. So if I ever have a new project, I run to my colleagues and ask them for their advice. And on the one hand, that's great to basically get a feedback. On the other hand, it's actually to just get approval, okay, to have that need of approval satisfied. And these two in the business world really are, slowing you down. So if you don't have that anymore, imagine you just have an idea and you run the modeling and then you just go to your boss and see what it is, if it's good or not. If it's no, then you try again, but you don't lose any time. You're just very effective, and you become basically the go-to guru in your industry when you don't have these two things: the fear of rejection and the need for approval, or something that is amazing if you see people that, or if in your relationship, if you're fighting often with your partner, fighting is not what you want. And I bet when you're in a relationship, you don't want to fight, you want harmony, and the other person also doesn't want to fight in harmony, but still we fight. Isn't that crazy? Okay, both want the same, have the same goal, harmony and a peaceful life and a beautiful life, but both fight, and the fight actually is what prevents them from having that life.
Mm-hmm.
So what we do in couples therapy, basically look why this fight happens. And this why is has nothing to do with being right or being wrong or with guilt or anything like this. It just has to do what's behind it, what's really at the core of this fight. And usually it's a fear. It's a fear of, I don't know, I don't want to be alone, that's why I fight. But usually the fighting makes me then alone because a couple split up, or other things. Yeah, fear of not being seen or not being valued enough or something like this. And we work with that fear. And when that fear is gone, there's no need for fighting. And then this harmony, this inner peace in this relationship can blossom. So that would be another example where we use Peakstates to basically help you live a beautiful life. And I always say, my goal is to help you to end your suffering and to live from here, from now into the future. There's a past, that's true, that's you, that makes your personality, but you want to live in the future and want to experience life. And that's what I help you.
Wow, that's absolutely incredible, Daniel. And I wonder if there's a lot that people want to hear more about, then surely they can contact you. Before we let people know how to do that, I wonder if there's a transformation that you've witnessed, that you can share, that you've seen, that you just thought, wow, this is amazing. This stuff really works.
Yes, this stuff really works. For me, it was a very personal story. I can tell you. As after going to the webpage and reading about that institute, I was curious. Okay, I was curious, so I contacted a therapist near me, and she had a session. So I booked 3 sessions. I said I want to really experience that, and in the first session I got a peak experience. And I don't tell you what it was, but it was beautiful, and I was feeling very light and very happy, and okay, it went away after 2 days, but it was still a peak experience. And then obviously I was hooked. I said, okay, if I can get this just in 1 session, what is there in it for me when I proceed? And yeah, and it's really a transformation that you will experience there. And it's, as I said, the words is very difficult to transport with the words, what's there. Try to experience it. There's very little risk for you involved with that pay for result basis. And I think that is actually the beauty for us, that we know that this stuff works so well. That's why we can offer you results. Incredible.
So how can people get in touch with you, Dr. Daniel Zeiss?
Well, my webpage would be the easiest thing. Go to my webpage, danielzeiss.com, and there are buttons. You just click and you send me a message, or you already book a 30-minute free consultation call with me, and then we see what I can do for you, and see what your goals and in life are, and I see how I can support you with that.
Fantastic. And is there a way for people to find out more about peak states of consciousness? You mentioned a website or an institute?
Yes. So on my webpage, there's already a small summary about the institute, and I linked the most important videos in the bottom of the webpage. So you can, I would start there. And when you want to learn more, you go to peakstates.com, and then you have, it's a research institute. You have so much information on the webpage, and you can read. And then there are books on Amazon. You just look for the Institute for the Study of Peak States, or for Dr. Grant McFedridge, and there are several books which you can order online and read them.
Awesome. And we'll have all those links below in the description for you, so you can just click on that and go directly to it. I highly recommend that you book that half hour and just find out what's possible. It's been amazing having you here discussing all of this with us, Dr. Daniel, and I really appreciate you being here today with us.
Thank you, Jennifer. It's a blast talking to you as always, and yeah, thank you.
Thank you. And do you have any final words that you'd like to leave with people with?
life is worth living. So if you don't feel this way, do something about it with Peakstates or with any other modality. But please, life is really worth living, and it's fun.
Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, for listening on the Wisdom Speakers and Seekers podcast. We'll see you next time.